There are many countries where the health ministry or agencies, or there are unofficial or official policies that recommend minimizing cell phone radiation to the brain, especially for children. Belgium, Switzerland, French Polynesia, Finland, Ireland, Germany, Greece, Israel, Turkey. Last I checked, and I'd like to get an update on that, actually. There were recommendations. Singapore has recently, hard to find those recommendations now. A lot of these countries will change their websites and sometimes bury the recommendations that they had previously. Even the United Kingdom has these recommendations, but most people in the United Kingdom aren't even aware that these recommendations exist. Russia, Denmark, India, Australia, Austria, Cyprus, Canada, Italy, Korea, Sri Lanka, Croatia, and Krakow, Poland, which has a lot of their conferences online that you can watch as well. And in the United States, I talked about the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Connecticut Department of Health, as well as the California Department of Health, recommend reducing exposure to kids.
Mobilni telefon je prijenosni elektronički uređaj za glasovnu, tekstualnu i slikovnu komunikaciju koju uspostavlja bežičnim spajanjem na mrežu baznih stanica. Štetna elektromagnetska polja najviše se emitiraju za vrijeme razgovora, dok se u stanju mirovanja i s povećanjem udaljenosti mobilnog uređaja značajno smanjuje izloženost korisnika. Izbjegavajte spavanje pored mobilnog uređaja. Dok spavate, ne stavljajte mobilni uređaj pod jastuk ili na noćni ormarić. Budite racionalni s istovremenom uporabom više uređaja. Odaberite uređaj s niskom specifičnom apsorbiranom snagom, takozvani SAR. Podatak o SAR-u možete pronaći u tehničkoj dokumentaciji svakog mobilnog uređaja. Šaljite tekstualne poruke umjesto da zovete mobitelom. Poštujte preporuke ograničene uporabe. Nosite uređaj što dalje od tijela u torbi ili ruksaku, umjesto u džepu hlača ili košulje. Mobilni uređaj najviše emitira elektromagnetska polja tijekom razgovora ili prijenosa podataka. Uvijek pričekajte prije nego prislonite telefon na uho, s obzirom da tijekom uspostave veze mobilni uređaj radi maksimalnom snagom. Ne razgovarajte na uređaj tijekom punjenja, uključite zvučnik ili rabite slušalice, te skratite vrijeme razgovora na mobilnom uređaju. Zbog uvođenja novih tehnologija primjenjuje se u zaštiti zdravlja načelo predostrožnosti, u skladu s kojim međunarodne nadležne organizacije provode preglede istraživanja i izdaju preporuke. Ovaj edukativni materijal dio je planiranog informiranja javnosti o utjecaju visokofrekventnih elektromagnetskih polja i neionizirajućeg zračenja baznih postaja javnih pokretnih komunikacijskih mreža na zdravlje ljudi, te je u skladu s predviđenom mjerom 10. strategije razvoja širokopojasnog pristupa u Republici Hrvatskoj u razdoblju od 2016. do 2020. godine. Promijenimo navike. Poštujte preventivne preporuke Ministarstva zdravstva.
Des ondes électromagnétiques sont émises par la plupart des appareils que nous utilisons dans la vie quotidienne. Pour s'en protéger efficacement et bien utiliser son mobile à la maison comme au travail, adoptons les bonnes pratiques. Retrouvez toutes les informations sur dgen.pf.
Did you know that cell phone, the one in your pocket, emits radio frequency radiation? as long as your phone's turned on, even if you're not talking or texting.
The American Academy of Pediatrics in over a dozen countries recommends reducing children's exposure to wireless radiation.
When using a cell phone, I always keep it away from my body. I use speakerphone or a headset like this.
To stop microwave exposure, I put my phone on airplane mode and turn off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth function.
I hold the phone at a distance and make sure it's not touching my body.
Cell phones are not toys. Children's brains and bodies are still developing and are vulnerable to wireless radiation. Practice safe and responsible habits with yourself and your children.
When using the computer, I always try to make sure my connection is corded, not wireless.
Remember not to use your cell phone in the car. The phone works at higher power in metal surroundings and bounces around, increasing your family's radiation exposure.
For their safety.
For your safety.
Because children are more vulnerable.
Remind them.
Remind yourself.
To limit your microwave radiation exposures.
Τα παιδιά μας εκτίθενται καθημερινά σε ένα ηλεκτρονικό νέφος, το οποίο δημιουργείται από την ακτινοβολία που εκπέμπουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνα, tablets και οι συνδέσεις μέσω Wi-Fi και άλλα παρόμοια. Η ακτινοβολία αυτή, σύμφωνα με τον Παγκόσμιο Οργανισμό Υγείας, είναι πιθανώς καρκινογόνα για τον άνθρωπο. Σύμφωνα με νεότερες έρευνες, η ακτινοβολία αυτή είναι πιθανό να προκαλέσει και άλλες σοβαρές επιδράσεις στην ανάπτυξη και λειτουργία του εγκεφάλου, του αναπαραγωγικού και άλλων συστημάτων του εμβρίου και του παιδιού, να προκαλέσει καταστροφή των νευρικών κυττάρων και του DNA, διάσπαση της προσοχής, διαταραχές στη μάθηση και άλλες νευρολογικές παθήσεις. Τα παιδιά είναι πολύ ευάλωτα. Μπορούμε όμως σε σημαντικό βαθμό να τα προφυλάξουμε από ένα σοβαρό κίνδυνο. Φτάνει να μάθουμε πώς.
Αφού μας αγαπάτε, γιατί μας ακτινοβολείτε με τα Wi-Fi και τα κινητά σας τηλέφωνα? Έχουμε δικαίωμα στην υγεία και πρώτοι εσείς μπορείτε και πρέπει να μας προφυλάξετε.
Στη βάση της αρχής της προφύλαξης, το Συμβούλιο της Ευρώπης, το Ευρωκοινοβούλιο, επιστήμονες, ιατρικοί και εκπαιδευτικοί σύλλογοι στην Ευρώπη συμβουλεύουν ότι θα πρέπει να μειωθεί η έκθεση των παιδιών στην ακτινοβολία που εκπέμπουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνα, tablets και οι συνδέσεις μέσω Wi-Fi, ιδίως στο σπίτι και στο σχολείο.
Η έκθεση των παιδιών σε ηλεκτρονικό νέφος εγκυμονεί κινδύνους. Η χρήση των κινητών και συσκευών Wi-Fi από παιδιά μικρότερα των 14 ετών πρέπει να αποφεύγεται. Προφυλάξτε την υγεία και το μέλλον των παιδιών σας. Το ίδιο ισχύει και για την έγκυο. Οι έφηβοι ποτέ δεν βάζουν το κινητό στο υπνοδωμάτιο τους, στις τσέπες τους, στα μπράτσα ή κοντά στο στήθος τους. Πάντα χρησιμοποιούν hands-free και κρατούν το κινητό μακριά από το σώμα τους.
Αξιοποιώ την τεχνολογία σωστά. Γνωρίζω τους κινδύνους και δεν εξαρτώμαι από αυτή. Χρησιμοποιώ ενσύρματη σύνδεση για τον υπολογιστή του σπιτιού μου και ενεργοποιώ το Wi-Fi και τα δεδομένα κινητής τηλεφωνίας μόνο όταν χρειάζεται και ποτέ όταν τα παιδιά μου είναι κοντά. Δεν χρησιμοποιώ κινητό τηλέφωνο στο αυτοκίνητο όταν τα παιδιά μου βρίσκονται σε αυτό. Η έκθεση στην ακτινοβολία είναι πολύ μεγαλύτερη. Προστατεύω πάντα τα παιδιά μου.
Η Γαλλία ήδη με νόμο απαγόρευσε τη χρήση Wi-Fi σε παιδικούς σταθμούς και σε χώρους όπου φιλοξενούνται παιδιά κάτω των 3 χρόνων. Επιτρέπει ελάχιστη χρήση στα σχολεία κάτω από αυστηρούς περιορισμούς.
Στον νηπιαγωγείο, στο σχολείο και στο σπίτι περνάμε τουλάχιστον το 75% του χρόνου μας. Απαιτούμε ασφάλεια, χωρίς ακτινοβολίες από Wi-Fi, κινητά και άλλες ασύρματες συνδέσεις. Η υγεία είναι δικαίωμα. Μην μας το στερείτε.
Δεν έχουμε το δικαίωμα να ρισκάρουμε την υγεία των παιδιών μας αναμένοντας παθητικά τους άλλους να κάνουν κάτι. Ας ξεχάσουμε τι είναι βολικό για μας και ας τους χαρίσουμε το καλύτερο δώρο, την υγεία τους, μετατρέποντας το σπίτι και το σχολείο σε όαση προστασίας.
Το σπίτι μου είναι όαση αγάπης και ασφάλειας. Σβήνω τα Wi-Fi και άλλες ασύρματες συνδέσεις όταν δεν χρησιμοποιούνται και κυρίως όταν τα παιδιά είναι στο σπίτι, και τα κλείνω πάντοτε το βράδυ. Αξιοποιώ το κουμπάκι on-off. Είναι τόσο απλό να μειώσω το χρόνο αχρίαστης έκθεσης. Επενδύω στην υγεία των παιδιών μου μακροχρόνια.
Η ζωή και το μέλλον τους είναι στα δικά μας χέρια.
Δώστε στα παιδιά ένα μοναδικό δώρο ζωής.
Την υγεία τους. Στο Μακάριο Νοσοκομείο προφυλάσσουμε τα παιδιά από την ακτινοβολία της ασύρματης επικοινωνίας, ιδίως των κινητών τηλεφώνων και του Wi-Fi. Ο Παγκόσμιος Οργανισμός Υγείας το 2011 κατέταξε την ακτινοβολία αυτή ως πιθανώς καρκινογόνα για τον άνθρωπο. Σύμφωνα με νεότερες επικυρωμένες έρευνες, η μακρόχρονη έκθεση στην ακτινοβολία αυτή είναι πιθανό να προκαλέσει και άλλες σοβαρές επιδράσεις στην ανάπτυξη και λειτουργία του εγκεφάλου, του αναπαραγωγικού, του ανοσοποιητικού και άλλων συστημάτων του εμβρίου και του παιδιού. Να προκαλέσει καταστροφή των νευρικών κυτάρων και του DNA, διάσπαση της προσοχής, διαταραχές στη μάθηση και άλλες νευρολογικές παθήσεις. Τα παιδιά και τα νεογνά, ιδιαίτερα τα πρόωρα, είναι πολύ ευάλωτα και πρέπει να τα προφυλάξουμε. Γι' αυτό, βασισμένοι στη διεθνώς αποδεκτή αρχή της προφύλαξης, στους αλάμους εντατικής θεραπείας παιδών και νεογνών του Μακάριου Νοσοκομείου, αποσυνδέσαμε το Wi-Fi. Χρησιμοποιούμε μόνο ασφαλές ενσύρματο διαδίκτυο, συμβουλεύουμε όλους όταν πλησιάζουν τα παιδιά να βάζουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνά τους σε λειτουργία πτήσης. Έτσι, φωτογραφίσουν και διασκεδάζουν τα παιδιά με μουσική και βίντεο, χωρίς να τα εκθέτουν σε επικίνδυνη ακτινοβολία. Γιατί τα παιδιά έχουν δικαίωμα στην υγεία.
Η υγεία είναι δικαίωμα. Είμαστε στερείτε.
Είμαστε περήφανοι για την πρωτοποριακή αυτή έρευνα που γίνεται με την επιστημονική καθοδήγηση και συνεργασία της Εθνικής Επιτροπής Περιβάλλον και Υγεία του Παιδιού. Καταφέραμε να μειώσουμε την έκθεση στην ακτινοβολία σε αποδεκτά επίπεδα ασφάλειας και θα συνεχίσουμε.
Μαζί δείχνουμε το δρόμο. Και το Μακάριο Νοσοκομείο εξελίσσεται διεθνώς σε μια πρότυπη όαση υγείας και προφύλαξης των παιδιών από την ακτινοβολία. Γονείς, μάθετε και εσείς πώς να προφυλάξετε τα παιδιά σας στο www.pedi.com.cy σήμερα.
And actually many more. And many, of course, countries have cell tower limits, network limits for the environmental levels that are much lower than ICNIRP, or sometimes they have policies for more protections near schools and homes or hospitals. They're designated as what is called sensitive areas. And I have those listed here: China, Russia, Canada, Israel, Bulgaria, Belgium, Chile, Serbia, Slovenia, and many cities, countries in Europe, Italy, Switzerland, India, and Greece. And this is, however, pretty typical in the United States, where, actually, wait, I skipped to the wrong slide. I'm going to go here. In Belgium, just to kind of do a view of different cell phone rules and regulations around the world, Belgium has banned the sale of mobile phones designed for children because of the radiation. So phones designed for children under 7 cannot be sold. And France and French Polynesia also have that rule. There's a ban on mobile phone advertising to children in France, Belgium, French Polynesia, and Russia. Phones have to be labeled with the SAR on the device at point of sale in France, Israel, India, Belgium, Russia, and Korea. And France tests cell phones for SAR compliance. And Wi-Fi is banned in nurseries and kindergartens in France, Israel, Cyprus, French Polynesia, Ghent, Belgium, and actually a lot of localities in Spain and Italy have recommended this as well. And there are a lot of recommendations and policies to reduce Wi-Fi exposure in schools in several of those countries. So in France, the ANFR, the agency that tests the frequencies, has been testing cell phones in body contact positions. And in 2016, it was revealed that the majority of them, when they were tested at body contact, like body contact, touching the body, straight touching the body, that they exceeded the limits. And they continue to test phones, although now they're only testing up to 5 millimeters because ultimately the EU changed its test procedures. Now the phones must be tested at 5 millimeters. Before they could of course test 10 or 15 millimeters from the body for their test they did on the body. 23 phone models have been software updated or withdrawn from the market due to these tests showing excessive levels. And there was a very important paper published in 2019 by Professor Om Gandhi, who examined this data from the ANFR phone tests and found that if you used the US FCC averaging and rules, their test methods, that in fact the phones would exceed US FCC limits up to 11 times over FCC limits. And so we presented this to the FCC. It was a very important part of our case. And you can learn more about that at PhoneGate.
The French government has recently released test results showing that 9 out of 10 phones tested exceed current government limits by as much as 3 to 4-fold. Phones are in fact tested away from the body, but when they were tested by the French government in the shirt or pants pocket equivalent, they issued 3 to 4 times more radiation that is currently approved. In France, they have called this PhoneGate because it's quite similar to Dieselgate. Dieselgate was when the Volkswagen engines were tested and found to artificially lower the amount of pollution emitted when they were hooked up to a computer. What we have here is that the tests were manipulated so that phones passed the tests because they were not being tested in the way they're usually used. The same thing happened with the diesel engines. They passed the tests because those tests did not reflect real-world conditions. Because of this, we are now concerned and want the government in the United States and France and Canada to acknowledge that we need new approaches to evaluating phones, and everybody has a right to know cell phones should never be kept in pants or shirt pocket.
And here are just some examples of how people are using phones. People will often rest their phones right up against the baby, certainly here in the United States, or put the phone in a pocket. There's pockets on these. Just tuck the phone in right to the baby. In France, there's a 2019 order that ensures that phones are labeled to reduce exposure. They recommend speakerphone, limiting children's exposure. So when you buy the phone, they also recommend keeping it away from the belly of pregnant women and keeping radio equipment away from the lower abdomen of adolescents. This is a public bus in Cyprus where they have a campaign that they have run with the Department of Health and also the Cyprus Committee on Environment and Children's Health. It says, "Don't irradiate me, learn how to protect me," and they have materials to educate the public. Over a dozen countries have stricter limits related to magnetic field, extremely low frequency fields, and some of those are official or unofficial policies, or new builds, that when you build new, the levels need to be lower, 3 or 4 milligauss. And it's an ever-changing field. In the United States, we don't have any limits for magnetic fields. In Maryland, where I live, the State Council on Children's Environmental Health 19-member panel met, and they issued a report recommending that schools use wired rather than wireless devices in classrooms, and that if a new classroom is to be built, that cables, Ethernet cables, be added to have wired access. And they recommend various ways that you can reduce exposure in the classroom. I also wanted to mention that Dr. Davis has, and her colleagues, she's been co-author to 2 new papers that we have been talking about recently. One was a meta-analysis of in vitro exposures to weak radiofrequency radiation fields, which found there was higher impacts among the faster growing, less differentiated types of cells, human spermatozoa and human epithelial cells. And the other thing that Dr. Davis has been working on is raising awareness about the increases in colon and colorectal cancer, and asking the question, could this increase in young people be due to radiofrequency radiation, and people putting the phones in their back pocket, in their front pocket, resting against their abdomen. I know my cousin was over the other day and he sat on his phone. He took the phone and put it down and sat on it, and that's where he kept it because he didn't have a purse. So there has been a staggering 4-fold increase in rectal cancer in American young adults, I know as well, in Iran and in many other countries. And there's also research indicating colorectal cells are exquisitely sensitive to radiofrequency radiation. So I know Dr. Henry Lai is presenting on this, but I think it is probably, there's so many important issues that we are dealing with in the United States, but this is absolutely front and foremost. Here we have, antennas and birds nesting on the antennas. Well, the latest 3-part paper by Blake Levitt and Henry Lai and Albert Manville, who's former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lead biologist on wildlife and bird effects from telecommunications towers, is very important because it really shows the science to substantiate the need to have regulations that protect our wildlife and their habitat. And the effects that have been seen that are documented in this paper show impacts to orientation, migration, food finding, reproduction, mating, and so forth. I'm thankful that he will be presenting to you.
The first 5G light here, LTE, and I can tell you that there's tremendous neurological damage happening within a mile range circumference of these towers. People's nervous systems are breaking down. Their minds are breaking down. They're dizzy, they're nauseous, they're sick, and this is going to be happening all over the country. And somebody has to do something to make sure that this is researched. We're all being experimented on. The FCC president is online saying there's no standards, we don't have time to make standards, just put it out there and we'll see what happens. And what's happening is people are getting very ill, they're being driven from their homes, they can't find a place to sleep, to rest, they're breaking down. 5G.
There's a lot of debate in the scientific community whether or not 5G does what you're saying. It should be studied thoroughly. We should have scientific evidence that in fact it is or is not doing what it's asserted to do, number one. Number two, we also have to take a look at what's happening with the entire industry in terms of our privacy.
So I'll just end with our recommendations and what we're doing now. We've recommended to President Biden and to Congress that there be a wired infrastructure, that there be a halt to 5G and 4G densification, and that there be assessment of the energy consumption and climate impact of 5G. Because of course, all of these new antennas and cell sites will use energy. Even if they're more efficient, there are just so many of them that it won't be able to make up for the increase, the sheer number of new antennas. And as well, we're talking about millions, billions worldwide of new wireless devices. All of them need to be charged, all of them using energy. What will be the impact to our energy consumption? And of course, an assessment of the environmental impact, review of the science, and the development of science-based safety limits for human and wildlife exposures. And as well, as I talked about with the New Hampshire report, a multimedia public awareness education campaign and policy to protect workers, and especially in school buildings, but in all public buildings. I mean, our workers are exposed to such high amounts of levels from the multiple devices that are attached to their body, even in a hospital, where workers will attach their phones and devices just right on their chest.
Como ya sabes, las antenas buena onda son necesarias. Y ahora con las nuevas antenas súper buena onda, el servicio está mejorando.
Estas son más modernas y amigables que en el pasado.
Se integran mejor al paisaje que las rodea y necesitamos instalar más para el desarrollo integral del país.
Cada vez usamos más el celular. Con las antenas super buena onda, la calidad y la cobertura del servicio mejora enormemente. Antenas super buena onda.
Mayor y mejor comunicación para más peruanos.
Gobierno del Perú. El Perú primero.
¿Esto te resulta familiar? Es porque necesitamos más antenas. Las antenas son buena onda, pero hay quienes creen que son dañinas para la salud. Te cuento que su nivel de potencia es menor al que genera el microondas, la licuadora y hasta un foco común. Su nivel de radiación es 500 veces menor al que recomienda la Organización Mundial de la Salud. Y si aún crees que son dañinas, buenas noticias. Estando más cerca unas de otras, las antenas reducen su potencia al igual que la de tu celular. A más antenas buena onda, menos potencia y mejor comunicación.
Hoy los lambayecanos nos conectamos más. Está comprobado que las antenas de telecomunicación no producen efectos negativos en las personas y que sus niveles de radiación son más bajos que los de tu TV o radio. Gracias a las antenas podemos conectarnos con las personas que más queremos, pero su rango limitado de alcance no lo permite si estamos lejos de ellas. Es por eso que el gobierno regional promueve la instalación de antenas en toda la región para mejorar nuestro sistema de comunicación y unirnos cada día más. Gobierno Regional de Lambayeque, Gerencia de Transportes y Comunicaciones.
Technology that experts say will make everything we do online faster and more convenient. But protesters downtown today are fighting back against 5G in San Diego. They say it can cause cancer. 10 News reporter Jennifer De La Cruz is live, and a lot of this technology is already here, Jen.
Yeah, you probably don't even notice them, but cell towers are everywhere, especially here in downtown. Like this one behind me, it's that white cylinder you see sitting on top of that light pole. And with 5G coming to San Diego, there's going to be even more of them.
Technology is supposed to connect us, but for this group, that's not the case.
People need to check this stuff out.
Protesting the rollout of a 5G network in San Diego.
We don't want to be experimented on. They're not doing the proper safety studies.
Susan Brinkman is the director at the Center for Electrosmog Prevention.
It's close-range exposure to microwave radiation.
Many people might have told you to keep your cell phones away from you while you're sleeping because of all the radiation that it emits. Now imagine if the radiations from a simple mobile phone can cause ill effect to your body, what would radiations coming out from a full cell phone tower do to your health? Actress Juhi Chawla today turns a citizen journalist, and she's talking about the ill effects that radiations from cell phone towers can do to your body. Remember, the government of India has given directives to all mobile phone companies to reduce their radiations by 1/10 starting the 1st of September.
Hi, I'm citizen journalist Jui Chawla Mehta here. Radiation from cell towers, which have been mushrooming up in our city, on top of residential buildings, near schools, on top of hospitals. The cause that I have been involved with and I would like to spread awareness about is the harm that this can do to our health. Living in front of a bunch of cell towers 24/7, whether you're sleeping, you're waking, whatever you're doing, all the time these rays are hitting you. Children, because their skull is thinner, these waves which are traveling can penetrate their skull. 14 mobile cell towers came up almost overnight. We wrote to the Chief Minister once, twice. They did reply, but they told us to address our concern to Mantralay. We put up banners outside our building requesting the Chief Minister to take notice. The press all came, they all wanted to know what it was about, and literally within 2 weeks all the towers went. This is happening not just in Mumbai in front of my house, it's happening opposite practically everybody's house.
I think it was almost 3 weeks ago. I was working from home and I heard some noise out front and went to the window and saw that they were digging in the little garden in front of my front porch. And that was the first I heard about it. No notification, no letter, no correspondence, nothing prior to them showing up and digging. There was a street light there. It was actually right out by the curb line. They took that pole down, installed a new pole further away from the curb, closer to my property, to hang this new 5G tower on top of it. It's directly in front of my front door. It's a view from the second floor. I have to be fortunate enough to have a balcony. I look at this giant 55-gallon drum looking cell tower right off the front of my property. It's maybe 10 feet from my front porch. I went out on social media a little bit just to vent some frustration, and I did hear from some folks. I think on 3rd Street along Susquehanna Art Museum, there was one installed.
One day we saw some guys digging, and we asked what they were doing, and they said, "We're digging a hole." No, we had no warning whatsoever what was going to go into that hole. So it was quite a surprise as we saw it being erected. Normally, when some construction is going to happen, it's just a courtesy that someone who's going to do that construction or someone who's responsible would let you know, would let business owners know. I mean, when we have to do anything at all in the city, we as a nonprofit organization, we have to go through several layers of approval with the city. And in this case, we weren't even given the pleasantry of, hey, this is going to happen. A letter, a form letter, an email, a phone call, nothing.
Providence. Look at what I'm standing in front of. This is when you know you shouldn't vote for the elected officials that approved this. A 2017 law allowed this, and look at what's right here next to this. There is no standards. And look, not too far away, that's an elderly's home, and they got antennas on top of that. Like, it ain't enough to have that in the neighborhood and a 5G antenna right there. Nope, we got to put them on top of buildings where the old people live around here. This is ridiculous. We got to reclaim our public rights away.
Attenzione! 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 Noi vogliamo il principio di precauzione! Noi vogliamo il principio di precauzione!
My name is Ira Brown. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I have glioblastoma brain cancer. I was diagnosed in 2011. I was an excessive cell phone user, 5, 6, 7 hours a day consistently for years. And I got glioblastoma from that thing. Basically, I'm a caution optimist. I do believe, I have to go a little slow because my brain doesn't work like normal people's do because of my tumor. But I'm not against progress. I'm just against dangerous progress. I know for a fact that people with diseases like cancer and glioblastoma brain cancer do not want anything in their lives to aggravate their condition and make it reoccur on them. If you would only know how much you had to go through to survive this disease, you would rethink this technology.
The town of Easton has decided to stop its 5G wireless technology rollout until research and testing shows it's safe for humans and the environment. A 5G cease and desist resolution was unanimously approved by the town on May 7th. The American Academy of Pediatrics and hundreds of medical and scientific experts have advised the Federal Communication Commission to test the long-term safety of 5G technology. Easton is the first town in Connecticut to ban 5G.